We analyzed over 2,000 fishes for their contamination with the most toxic components of oil, which are called PAHs. And every single one that we analyzed had a certain level of PAH.
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 most expensive mistakes of the century so far.
If you can't fill out your application correctly, there is some indication that maybe you don't have the apparatus in place or the competence to execute the money that you could win.
For this list, we'll be looking at human errors that cost people, companies, and governments an absolute fortune. Any mistakes we missed? Let us know in the comments below. Number 10. Garbage treasure.
As soon as I put it in the bin at home, I had a second thought, in the back of my mind. You've never thrown a hard drive out before. Why start now?
In 2013, James Howells had a clear-up at his house in Newport, Wales. Intending to throw out an old, empty hard drive, the IT worker mistakenly placed a second identical one in the bin instead. However, that device held a mountain of 8,000 bitcoins, which he purchased in 2009.
Yeah, there's a specific file on that hard drive called a wallet file, which the Bitcoin is stored in. And without that file, there is no way of getting the money back.
At one point in 2022, that was worth an estimated $181 million. Howells has since lobbied the Newport Council to let him go landfill diving, but they've rejected him repeatedly due to the environmental impacts. Yet, each year, a further 50,000 tons of garbage are added. In 2022, Howells assembled a team of experts for an excavation that would cost $11 million. But an approval from the council seems to be a long shot.
But so far, no luck. He once told NBC News, quote, "It is soul-destroying, to be honest. Every second of the day, I am thinking about what could have been."
Number 9. The Japan Typo. We've all made typos. Sometimes it's gotten us in hot water with family and friends. But for most of us, such a mistake doesn't usually cost millions of dollars. That is, unless you're the unnamed employee at Japanese brokerage firm Mizuho Securities, who in 2005 made a big whoopsie. The trader meant to sell one share in a company called JCOM for 610,000 yen, or $5,041 at the time. Instead, they reversed those numbers and accidentally sold 610,000 shares for 1 yen, which is less than a cent. Yikes! The erroneous transaction was processed anyway, which lost the company at least $225 million. We wouldn't be looking forward to our performance review if we were that employee. Number 8. Education error.
What if you were responsible for making a mistake that caused all the students in your state to lose out on $400 million?
When attempting to secure a grant worth millions, double-checking your work is a must. The state of New Jersey learned this the hard way in 2010. While submitting a high-profile application for a federal education grant, a member of then-Governor Chris Christie's administration made a terrible mistake. Instead of inputting budget figures for the years 2008 and 2009, they entered information for 2010 and 2011.
Can you explain how or where this information was presented in your application?
No, I cannot. I don't.
This seemingly minor error lost the state much-needed points to rank higher in the competition, putting them just behind Ohio, which came in 10th place. As a result, New Jersey narrowly missed out of education funding potentially worth $400 million. In the aftermath, Christie fired his education commissioner, Brett Schundler, for the mistake. Number 7. Blockflix.
Netflix set up a meeting with Blockbuster in the early days of Netflix, and I can only imagine it playing like a gangster movie or something.
Love 'em or hate 'em, no one can argue with the fact that Netflix changed the game when it comes to content distribution. And things could have looked so much different had Blockbuster been open-minded in 2000. Back then, still a DVD rental company, Netflix met with then leaders of the market to propose a buyout of $50 million. According to co-founder Mark Randolph, Blockbuster CEO John Antioco struggled not to laugh at the idea before turning them down.
We decided we had to sell ourselves to someone, and Blockbuster was the obvious person. And when they asked how much, we said $50 million, and they basically laughed at us.
Following the rejection, Netflix eventually became stiff competition for Blockbuster and played a role in the company's ultimate failure. They have since transitioned into streaming as well as film and TV production, generating a revenue of around $31.6 billion in 2022 alone. Number 6. The Cerro Grande Fire.
I hope it's not the end of his professional career, and that when the review is finalized, we'll learn more about that.
In May 2000, the National Park Service in New Mexico started a controlled fire at the Cerro Grande Peak. This effort, which was carried out partly to reduce the risk of wildfire, ended up causing the very event it sought to prevent. As it was springtime, the dry and windy conditions caused the blaze to get out of control. And it certainly didn't help that the crew tasked with tending to the fire was way too small to deal with it.
Fire is, as a tool, sometimes is risky business, and this is not the first prescribed fire in the country that has escaped.
6 days after the flames were ignited, the nearby town of Los Alamos had to be evacuated, and later that night, 235 homes were destroyed. Eventually, it was extinguished, leaving in its wake an estimated damage of $1 billion.
When she was forced to evacuate, she assumed nothing would be left when she returned.
I grabbed, insurance papers, all my papers, and as many pictures as I could find, because you can't replace pictures.
Number 5. The Sinking Submarine. In 2013, Spain wanted to make waves in the military world by commissioning the state-owned firm Navantia to build 4 S-80 submarines. However, the engineers had miscalculated the weight of the submarines, making them 110 U.S. tons too heavy. This meant they would sink right into the ocean bed. Having already spent $650 million, the Spanish government spent millions more to rectify the problem by making the submarines longer. This proved to be yet another costly mistake, as the vessels then become too long to fit in their dock. The U.S. had a similar problem in 2008 when one of its most expensive aircrafts, the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, crashed following a miscalculation due to the presence of moisture on its sensors.
Turn left, but the car turns right. What is going on? That's not the way it's supposed to work. That's the scenario these pilots were in.
Number 4. Howie Hubler's Howler.
I just wanted you to know that yes, Morgan has suffered some losses, but our liquidity is strong and there's no cause for concern.
Would Benny Klieger be concerned?
In the lead up to the subprime mortgage financial crisis of the late 2000s, there was one person involved that really didn't help matters. His name? Howie Hubler, first as a trader, and then as the head of the global proprietary credit group at investment firm Morgan Stanley. Hubler was repackaging risky mortgages and selling them to investors.
Some of the firm's most important clients, big corporate pension plans, the world's central banks, came to us because they wanted advice on investing their capital.
He did this expecting the repackaged mortgages to be less risky, only to later realize that they were in fact worthless. Hubler's actions cost his company an enormous $9 billion, the largest single trading loss at the time. For causing this massive error, Morgan Stanley let Hubler resign from the company, complete with a severance package worth $10 million.
All this time I've been trying to figure out who I'm betting against, and it's Morgan Stanley, which is me.
Number 3. Station Sadness.
It could have been avoided, says this man. And who's paying the bill now? Well, taxpayers, of course.
Trains are vital infrastructure, but they're not so useful if they cannot actually transport people. In 2014, France's state-owned railway company, SNCF, decided to revamp their service with a new fleet of trains. Altogether, they purchased around 2,000 of them at the cost of $20.5 billion. However, what they failed to realize was that the measurements sent to the manufacturers were tailored to the more recent railway stations.
Previous government, of course, saying it was absurd to split the train operators from the train network, adding a layer of bureaucracy.
This meant that the trains were too large to pass through about 1,300 of the country's older stations. The SNCF reportedly blamed the 1997 split of the railway network for the miscommunication of sizes. Regardless, the estimated cost to widen the platforms was around 50 million euros.
You can almost imagine that conversation, can't you? To tell them that these 2,000 trains they'd ordered at a cost of $70 billion were too fat.
Number 2, the Deepwater Horizon Oil Spill.
On April 20th, 2010, a BP oil rig called Deepwater Horizon exploded 50 miles off the coast of Louisiana.
Multinational oil company BP realized the cost of their shortcuts in 2010 when an explosion rocked their Deepwater Horizon drilling rig off the U.S. coast. Investigations pointed toward the cheap materials used in building the oil wells as the cause of the incident. In all, about 210 million gallons of oil spilled into the Gulf of Mexico in what is now regarded as one of the biggest environmental disasters in history.
Still burning? There's still flow, Mr. Jimmy.
Oh, come on. Please. This significant amount completely dwarfs that of the Prestige oil spill, which occurred in Spain and resulted in the loss of 17.8 million gallons of oil. Similar to the Deepwater incident is the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan, which also could have been prevented by proper maintenance of the nuclear plants.
So the radioactivity we see in the environment from Fukushima is volatile elements that came out of the reactor as it was overheating and melting down.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1, AOL's fall.
I had a really great business record up until then, and even today.
In 2000, AOL splashed out $182 billion to merge with Time Warner. This deal created a partnership that was said to be valued at $350 billion. With all that cash, expectations were incredibly high that this pairing would be very fruitful for the firms involved. But then, only months later, the dot-com internet bubble burst. Exasperated by a recession, the merger began to look really bad. By 2003, AOL Time Warner announced a loss of $98.7 billion, a record amount in corporate history.
There were a lot of people at Time Warner that weren't as enthusiastic about the digital path, weren't as enthusiastic about the internet, were worried how it might cannibalize some of their businesses, so they tended to play defense.
In 2009, Time Warner cut their losses and let AOL run free. They then hopped around industry giants afterwards, from Verizon in 2015 before being sold alongside Yahoo for $5 billion to Apollo Global Management in 2021.
We've spent over $1 billion to create the world's largest high-speed network. Now with 56K, connections are faster than ever.
It's fast. Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.